Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bluddworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's video is going to be dungeon mastering tips and ideas that worked, and specifically I'm going to be talking about campaigns. So I've been seeing this question bounced around for like the last week to week, 2 weeks or so, and the question is really focused on possibly two things. So the first part that I came across was how to create a long-lasting campaign. And then the second question was really one that I started thinking for myself was, well, before we can get into developing a long-lasting campaign and to, give some tips or hints or, just discuss that topic in general, um, we need to be working with the same definition or at least identify the few definitions that might come into our thought process. So, first of all, a campaign, and this is obviously my interpretation and my opinion on it. A traditional campaign is designed to be a series of adventures that are connected in some way. So generally speaking, like if you're doing against the giants, you're going to run those three adventures as a campaign, and those three adventures have run straight through back to back during like reasonably normal play sessions. Let's say once or twice a week for between 3 and 4 hours a session. Those three adventures will most likely take a few months to up to a year in order to run through that entire campaign. And you could certainly consider that to be a campaign. All right. And then that group of player characters will move forward and start, potentially start the next segment of that, which is usually like Vault of the Drow, or they can go into a completely different direction. But that's I think the typical or most common perception of what a campaign is. But it's not necessarily long lasting if you consider that this is just a campaign that's going to be self-contained, and then once that campaign is over, once you've done those three adventures, you're going to start a new campaign. All right, and so that kind of builds into it the idea that during a player character's career, they are actually going to be involved with several campaigns, unless obviously they get killed off at some point. But so that's one way of thinking about what a campaign is. Another way of thinking about a campaign is that a campaign is a more player character focused gameplay over an extended period of time. And so what you could say is, well, I might not necessarily have a series of interconnected adventures as campaigns, but the campaign is going to be about this group of player characters, and I'm going to bring them from level 1 through level 14, 15, 16, 18, whatever. All right, and we're going to keep on playing until all of those player characters either retire or they die off. So that's another version of a campaign. One that potentially is more longer lasting than the more traditional that I brought up. Then you have a third option of thinking about it, and this is a campaign that is very, very specific. So, like, if you're going to run like the Dragonlance series of adventures, now those are based on playing, those 12 or so adventure modules, which will take you a long time to play, but you're playing with the pre-generated characters. You're playing with the Dragonlance cast through that. It may have no connection whatsoever to the rest of your gameplay, with other player characters set in a different world or whatever. And so even though that's going to last a long time because there are, at least 12, if I'm recalling correctly, at least 12 different adventure modules in that. So it's going to take a long time to run it, but it's a different type of campaign. So knowing what kind of a definition, or what kind of a campaign you're going to look to run, that's one of the first decisions that you'll have to make as a dungeon master, and that will help inform potentially how long lasting that campaign is meant to be. The second thing I wanted to bring up is that in AD&D First Edition Dungeon Master's Guide, it was mentioned, and I forget if it was Mike Carr that wrote this or if Gary Gygax wrote this. I mean, even though I brought it up just recently, I don't want to jump into the book and take a look again. Um, they put the sequence of gameplay or game mechanics, rules, campaign, and then player characters and everything else in that particular order. So in that priority order, the game comes first, and I'm going to argue that the type of game and the rule sets that you're going to be using comes first, followed by the campaign, followed by player characters' interaction within that. And the reason why that's very important is because in many cases, I'm not going to say all, but in many cases, I, as a dungeon master, when I'm thinking of a campaign to run with a particular group of players, we choose the game set rules that we're going to be using for this campaign. So it's the game rules that really inform what kind of a campaign we're going to be running. So if I decide I'm going to run a campaign using Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition, I'm going to run a campaign set in the world of Greyhawk. Now I'm starting to get some ideas about, what that campaign is going to start to look like, what its theme's going to be, but I still don't know how long lasting it's going to be. I still need to look at those game rules again and decide, well, what optional rules am I going to include? What house rules am I going to use? What other rules am I going to discard? And then what homebrews am I going to introduce to the game system as well? Because all of those have an impact on how long lasting your campaign can be. Your players are going to come to your table with certain expectations about the nature of the game that you're going to be running, the theme of the game you're going to be running. And I have found that when you tell them up front that it's going to be a long-lasting campaign, that draws players in as well, because players really do want something that's going to be long-lasting, that they can really dedicate their time and focus on, on a character that they're going to bring through this storyline that you're kind of creating for them. Then you're telling them these are the rules that we're going to be using, this is the setting that we're going to be using, and you're building up the expectations of that long-lasting campaign that you're kind of selling them on. They're not so much just playing their character through, or they're not anticipating that it's just going to be a series of interconnected adventure that they go on, but they're also thinking of it in the long term as what they're actually doing is going to have an impact on the world. So I call this like a world campaign, when you're taking all of those elements and bringing them together. And if you sell your campaign as being something that a player character, if they survive, you have every intention of them starting at first level and moving forward until their upper levels, until they either choose to retire their character because their character has achieved all of that player's expected goals, or the character has died off, and so thus that ends the campaign for that character. All right, but it's a world story that you're telling here. So when a character dies and your campaign is a world story being told, then that's not going to interfere with the campaign. It doesn't bring the campaign to a close for that player. All right, it may so for that player character, but not the player. So the player will just re-roll a new character up and integrate that character into the overall story that you're telling. All right, so even if they're going to wait on the wings for a good opportunity to step into the adventure, or maybe they'll just wait in the wings and wait for that adventure to come to a close, and then come in for possibly the next adventure, the next module that you're running, or the next story that you're going to begin telling about the world. That is a way that you create a long-lasting campaign. So, like I said, in that article, or I'm pretty sure it was an article where they mentioned that the average campaign only lasts about 6 sessions long. I don't see a reason for that unless you just didn't build up the expectation that the campaign is meant to last for a long time. And sometimes you'll go through players, bringing in players. Don't let the fact that you've brought in some players and then players dropped out of the game for whatever reasons, as long as you have some original players there, you can continue that world story campaign and just keep on bringing in new players to keep on replacing. I don't consider a campaign ended under those circumstances until the last of the original players, has ended their time at your table. All right, because when you introduce new players and new player characters to the story, they're just continuing that story as it moves along. All right, that story doesn't end with the death of one character, 3 characters, even 4 characters. Sometimes the world story doesn't end with a total party wipe, because you can keep that story still there at that point and bring in a whole new group of player characters, all right, where they can pick up from where the others had left off. Now, if you lose all of the characters and all of the players, then you're at a point now where there is no connection to what happened previously, and so it would be much harder to pick up that campaign where you left off with another, entirely different group of players. So in that event, I would say to just restart a new campaign. It could be the same campaign, but with new players at first level again. So that's another point I'm going to make here as far as looking to create a long-lasting campaign, is never start a long-lasting campaign with characters that are in a middle or high-level range. Always start those long, anticipated campaigns with first level or even 0 level characters. And the reason being is that you want the players to come in and to start thinking about the group dynamic. All right from the beginning, think about the group dynamic, and that will become part of their story, is the development of everybody else's story as they're moving forward, as they're learning about the world that surrounds them, as they're following these adventure arcs that are, may or may not be interconnected with one another, but a good DM should kind of try to weave at least some kind of a very subtle, thread throughout all adventures, even if it's just they hear some chatter about their previous adventure, while they're sitting in a tavern, drinking their beers and relaxing, or they may hear about some like a hint or about a future adventure that is going to be way, way down the road, but you know that you're anticipating running that with your player character. So just constantly try to reinforce the idea that that the world is just ever evolving, that the players, through their characters, have a chance to alter that story, or to participate in that story, to enhance that story, or in the event of a player character death, if a player character dies, bring in the new player character with some kind of a connection still to that story, or maybe even to that character, and bring them in, on those, under those circumstances, and with that understanding of the, of the evolving world lore that is going to help you keep your players longer, and it'll help your campaigns run much, much longer, because now you're not always so very focused on, well, I'm just doing these 3 adventures and then I don't know what else we're going to do from there. It allows you to, just think outside of that really confined approach to what a campaign is. And yes, you can have several, several different campaigns taking place within the broader, world campaign that you are running. So I hope that kind of, answered some questions that you might have had. Just to really briefly summarize, if you want to have a long-lasting campaign, tell your players up front that you're looking to run a long-lasting campaign. Make sure that the rule set that you're using is going to allow that to be possible. Make sure that the world is, prepared for something. You have plenty of stories to kind of bring it in and tie it all together, or at the very least, thinly thread through some kind of an underlying tone and theme to your campaign world, and and that will keep the players continuing on forward, even if their characters passed away. So that's the biggest tip that I can give you, is to just inform your players of your intentions, that this is going to be a very long lasting campaign. And as long as you have an original player sitting at your table, you can just keep on rolling forward. Doesn't matter how many characters they've gone through. So I hope you found this helpful. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, please leave that in the comments section. If you hadn't subscribed, please consider subscribing. And I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. Maybe once my current campaign has some openings and you might want to jump in on a campaign, as long as you're willing to, sit through a weekly session every Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time until about 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and consistently make the campaign. It's going to be a long-lasting campaign. I'm anticipating well over a year that my campaign, I'm expecting for it to run. And everything that I said in this video is basically what I'm, at least attempting to do in my own campaign that I'm running now. So once again, thanks for joining. Have a great rest of your holiday weekend if you're celebrating Labor Day. And as always, I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. Have a great afternoon.